Welcome back, class, to another lesson in programming in Java. In this lesson, we'll take a deep dive into loops and arrays. Some of the topics we'll be covering are the different types of loops. We'll talk about nested loops as well, how those work. We'll also talk about arrays because arrays work really well with loops. So for our introduction, just a little bit of review. Remember the compound assignment operators, right? A shorthand for writing, the same variable but incremented by some value or decremented by some value. Or you could use products, division, and modulus operator as well. Of course, relational operators, those are great for making comparisons. Classic operator, right, for any conditional statement or any condition inside of another statement. So Java statements. So remember, it's just a single unit of execution, ends with a semicolon. And then, of course, logical operators. This helps us chain together conditions, make really complex Boolean expressions. We've talked about scope as well. Because we're introducing a new type of control flow statement, we'll be using another block of code, another example of using curly braces. Of course, we've covered conditional statements, including the switch statement, where we use the break keyword. That's going to make a comeback in this lesson. And of course, we talked about complex expressions, some tips on how to evaluate them. We introduced looping statements as well. We briefly talked about these. Today, we're going to take a deep dive, of course. So for our introduction, before we get to loops, we are going to introduce a new operator, and those are unary operators. So operators that operate on a single operand, performing simple operations like incrementing and decrementing, or decrementing, depending on how you want to pronounce that. So the increment and decrement operators are another shorthand for changing the value of a variable. So it's really similar to the compound operators. We'll see how these work. So we have the increment, which is plus plus, and decrement, which is minus minus. Increment is just going to increase the value of a variable by 1. Simple as that. Decrement, well, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to decrease the value of a variable by 1. So let's say day of year was 10. If we do plus plus, day of year becomes 11. If day of year is 10 and we do minus minus, it'll become 9. So we have our prefix and postfix for unary operators. Keep in mind, there are more unary operators. We're just going to cover the ones that are most useful to us. But yeah, we need to talk about prefix and postfix because depending on where you put the operator, either before or after the variable, it's going to have slightly different behavior. So the order in which you put the increment or decrement operator actually matters. We call it pre-increment or decrement when you place a unary operator before the variable, and then there's post-increment or decrement that occurs when you place the unary operator after the variable. So they essentially do the same thing but operate in a slightly different order. So the pre-increment is going to increment the value first. It's going to change the value and immediately return the new value. And then post increment is going to return the current value. And then after, in the very next statement, then it'll increment. So the change doesn't happen right away with post increment or decrement, right? So remember with post, when you put it before here, it's not going to make the change until the next statement. So let's see what that looks like and why that matters. So in this example, we have I is equal to 5. And then we do a pre-increment. So we do plus plus I. Remember,